Hello, my name is Kevin Perez, and this is my presentation on Watchmen and my interpretation on Rorschach as a hero. The main character Rorschach from the comic book Watchmen in Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons is a complex character made of objectifying morals and a traumatizing past. He has quirks to his character that makes him unique, like how he sees the world in black and white, and how he speaks in unfinished sentences to others, but in his journal he writes in complete sentences. Rorschach is a man who seeks justice and takes initiative in delivering it, even going as far as to kill criminals. But is he a real hero? Some would say that his actions are wrong and that murder can never be justified. But if so, why can he be considered a good protagonist for this series? And are his actions justified by his beliefs? One of Rorschach's beliefs is known as moral absolutism, that there are only good or bad people that exist in the world. No one can be morally gray per se. There is a clear definition between the good and the bad must be punished. In the very first chapter of Watchmen, Rorschach's journal talks about how he sees himself above all others, above the whores and politicians of New York City. Rorschach, throughout the comic, seems to despise those who have chosen the wrong path, and he frequently talks about his dislike for prostitutes. From the first page, where he talks about them and the scum of the city being covered up to their waists in blood and filth, to his mother, who resorted to prostitution for money. And he even refers to this to his friend Adrian Viet, a former Watchman ally of his. He refers to him as a prostitute, mentioning to him how, even though he is retired, that he has made his hero persona, Osmandius, into something for the media to buy, earning money and fame off of his comics, action figures, and merchandise. This is also brought up when he is taken into prison, where he tells his therapist, Dr. Malcolm Long, that he knows that he is not talking to him because he wants to help him, but because he knows that it will make him famous. In Chapter 6 of Watchmen, he says, "Other people down in cells. Behavior more extreme than mine. You don't spend any time with them, but then they're not famous. Won't get your name in the journals. You don't want to make me well. You want to know what makes me sick." Rorschach also seems to come off as some kind of nationalist, talking about President Truman in a good light when he speaks of the Hiroshima bombing, something controversial yet morally gray considering all of the death and the destruction that it brought upon, but the good that it did in ending World War II, for the America at least. Rorschach somewhat idolizes him, comparing him to his unknown father as well, something he had started to do at a young age, revealing in the documents presented by the home that he was taken into after being pulled out of his mother's apartment. "I like President Truman, the way my dad would have wanted me to. Rorschach, very obviously, is fine with the death of others, as long as it brings justice for his own kind, that being his fellow American citizens, or in Watchman's case, bringing justice to the death of the comedian. In fact, this is supported by his admiration for the comedian, who even takes pleasure in hurting others for the right of his country. This is shown when he is with Night Owl, aka Dan Dryberg, who was pressing back against the rioting citizens against Watchmen. He throws a gas bomb into the crowd and laughs and says, 'Run, you suckers,' with a smile. Rorschach also goes so far as to say that when the comedian attempted to rape Sally Jespizek, the Silk Spectre, he calls it a moral lapse, as if trying to say that one mistake made by a man who consistently is doing the right thing can easily be overlooked. The question now is if he is truly a hero. Rorschach's story of saving the good people versus the bad is quite confusing, as he sees absolutism in good versus evil. He wants to do what is right by him and the good of the good people. That means to him to get rid of the bad. Rorschach, discussed by two detectives at the beginning of Chapter 1, is wanted for 2 counts of first-degree murder. One for a man he claims to have changed him, Walter Kovacs, into Rorschach, when he killed and kidnapped a little girl, and for when the Kane Act was put into place, outlawing vigilantes, when he killed a renowned serial rapist in response. He continues to fight crime despite the outlaw of vigilantes, fighting murderers and rapists, criminals of the law that the law could not catch. According to the Disaster Center, the amount of murders in New York in 1985 was 1,683. Had Rorschach come into a real existence, those murders could either have been stopped, or the criminals, not caught, would have been put away and or killed for the justice that the victims deserved. In 2019, according to the New York Times, New York saw an increase of murders by nearly 8% in the whole state, rising over 300 murders since 2016. While the comparison of numbers has considerably dropped, the idea of a Rorschach existing in our society would possibly put an end or a close finish to the murder and crime rate in New York City. While this may be seen as bad to most, it can be very much justified as good. Rorschach is a hero to those with trauma the same or similar to his. While the social justice system is somewhat corrupted, Rorschach is there to deliver the undelivered justice. He is a hero to those who have suffered from assaults, crimes, and the loss of loved ones, while the enemy, per se, at large, either free among people, are unable to be found, or given the wrong punishment for what they did. Rorschach is there to ensure the right thing is to be done, always. Evil must be punished, and Rorschach is not afraid to break the law to bring that justice to the table. He goes as far as to say that, even in the face of Armageddon, I shall not compromise in this. He is a hero to those with this trauma, as well as childhood trauma. I believe that he sees young children as good, a tabula rasa per se, and does not wish for them to be turned to the bad side. This can be shown in Chapter 10, where when Rorschach and Dan go back to Rorschach's apartment, he confronts his landlord, who he had previously called a whore about her lying about him on the news, calls her a whore again. She cries and says not to say that in front of her kids, for they do not know what she has done. He sees the crying boy behind her and pauses and decides to leave with Dan, instead of what he probably would have done, which would have been to beat her up. He leaves her and the children alone, perhaps assuming them, not knowing about their mother's feats, would leave them to be good, and his interaction with her would have sent them down the wrong path. One of Rorschach's final heroic moments ought to be his final moments in life in Chapter 12. After finding out Ozymandias' plan to murder half of New York, to end the possibility of World War III by faking an alien attack and assassinating the comedian, and the attempted murder of Dr. Manhattan in the process, he leaves into the Arctic tundra to go back to America and reveal the truth to the people. When Dan tells him that they need to compromise about something so big, he recalls his statement back in Chapter 1, stating, "No, not even in the face of Armageddon. Never compromise." Dr. Manhattan tells him that he cannot let him leave, and Rorschach knows that he cannot bend his beliefs for the good of the people. He knows that evil must be punished. He takes off his masks and says, "One body against foundations makes little difference. Well, what are you waiting for? Do it." Dr. Manhattan kills Rorschach as he asks, as Rorschach knows he cannot live without doing the right thing. He even cries, the first time we see any real emotion on adult Rorschach's true face. Admittedly, Rorschach can be controversial to others because of his extreme beliefs about good and evil. However, with the right perspective, Rorschach can be the hero to deliver justice to the citizens of New York. He's not afraid to take any actions necessary to eliminate threats and the criminals that plague the streets. In a world where the laws can be bent for those with privilege, where loopholes can be made, and criminals don't get caught, Rorschach is needed to put an end to it.